Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and today we're bringing you part 2 of H.G. Wells' The Cone. Raut is an artist drawn to the ironworks and coal mines of northern England to capture their industrial landscapes in the late 19th century. While in Newcastle, he's struck by an affair with Mrs. Horrocks, the wife of Mr. Horrocks, an ironworks manager. They plan to elope together, but Mr. Horrocks has overheard their plans. Now the impassioned industrialist is giving his visiting artist a most unwelcome tour of his establishment. As we rejoin our story, the pair has just arrived at a dangerous rail crossing. Horrocks waved his arm jovially as he led Raut down the railway tracks at the bottom of the railway cutting below the ironworks, gesturing round at the play of smoke and signal lights.
Fine effects! Here comes a train. The puffs of smoke, the orange glare, the round eye of light in front of it, the melodious rattle. Fine effects! But these furnaces of mine used to be finer before we shoved cones in their throats and saved the gas.
How? Cones?
Cones, my man, cones. I'll show you one closer up. The flames used to flare out of the open throats. Pillars of cloud by day, red and black smoke and pillars of fire by night. Now we divert the gas in pipes and burn it to heat the blast, and the top is shut by a cone. You'll be interested in that cone.
But every now and then you see a burst of fire and smoke up there.
The cone's not fixed. It's hung by a chain from a lever and balanced by an equipoise. You shall see it nearer. Otherwise, there'd be no way of getting fuel into the thing. Every now and then the cone dips, and out comes the flare.
I see. The moon gets brighter.
Come along.
Horrocks abruptly gripped Raut's shoulder and moved him suddenly towards the railway crossing. And then came one of those swift incidents, vivid and so rapid that they leave one doubtful and reeling. Halfway across the rails, Horrocks' hand suddenly clenched upon Raut like a vice and swung him backward and through a half-turn so that he looked up the line. And there, a chain of lamplit carriage windows telescoped swiftly as it came towards them, and the red and yellow lights of an engine grew larger and larger. As Raut grasped what this meant, he turned his face to Horrocks and pushed with all his strength against the arm that held him back between the rails. The struggle did not last a moment. Just as certain as it was that Horrocks held him there, so it was certain that he had been violently lugged out of danger. The train came roaring by, and they stood panting by the gate into the ironworks.
I did not see it coming.
The artist spoke breathlessly, trying to keep up an appearance of ordinary conversation, even in spite of his own apprehensions. Horrocks answered with a grunt.
The cone. I thought you did not hear.
I didn't.
I wouldn't have had you run over then for the world.
Horrocks stood silently for half a minute, then turned abruptly toward the ironworks again.
See how fine these great mounds of mine, these furnaces look in the night. That truck yonder, up above there, up it goes and out tilts the slag. See the palpitating red stuff go sliding down the slope. We get nearer.
He came and took Raut by the elbow, and so they went along side by side. Raut answered Horrocks vaguely. What, he asked himself, had really happened on the rail line? Was he deluding himself with his own fantasies? Or had Horrocks actually held him back in the way of the train? Had he just come within an ace of being murdered? Suppose this slouching, scowling monster did know everything. For a minute or two then, Raut really was afraid for his life, but the mood passed as he reasoned with himself. After all, Horrocks might have heard nothing. At any rate, he had pulled him out of the way of the train in time. His odd manner might be due to a mere vague jealousy. He was talking now of the ash heaps and the canal.
Hey?
What? Or rather, the haze in the moonlight.
Blood-red vapor as red and hot as sin. But yonder there, where the moonlight falls on it, it is as white as death. Come along to the rolling mills.
His threatening hold on the artist's shoulder was not so evident now, and Raut felt a little reassured. But all the same, what on earth did Horrocks mean about white as death and red as sin? Coincidence, perhaps? They went through the rolling mills, where amidst an incessant din the deliberate steam hammer beat the juice out of the succulent iron, and black, titanic rollers pressed the molten bars like hot sealing wax between the wheels. Horrocks spoke into Raut's ear to be heard above the noise.
Come on!
They walked to the base of the great brick furnace and peeped through the little glass viewing hole and saw the tumbled fire writhing in the pit of the blast. Then, with green and blue patches dancing across the dark from their dazzled eyes, they rose the lift by which the carts of ore and fuel and lime were raised to the top of the big cylinder. As they walked out upon the narrow rail that overhung the furnace, Raut's doubts came upon him again. Was it wise to be up here, if Horrocks did know everything? Do what he would, he could not resist a violent trembling. Right under his foot was a sheer depth of 70 feet. It was a dangerous place. They pushed past a cart of coal fuel to get to the railing that crowned the place. The reek of the furnace, a sulphurous vapor streaked with pungent bitterness, seemed to make the distant hillsides quiver.
That's the cone I've been telling you of. And below that, 60 feet of fire and molten metal, with the air of the blast frothing through like gas and soda water.
Raut gripped the handrail tightly and stared down at the cone. The heat was intense. The boiling of the iron and the tumult of the blast made a thunderous accompaniment to Horrocks' voice. But the thing had to be gone through, perhaps, after all.
In the middle temperature near 1,000 degrees, if you were dropped into it, you'd flash into flame like a pinch of gunpowder in a candle. Put your hand out and feel the heat of his breath. Why, even up here I've seen the rainwater boiling off the carts. In that cone there, it's a sight too hot for roasting cakes. The top side of it's 300 degrees.
300 degrees?
300 centigrade, mind. It will boil the blood out of you in no time.
Raut turned from the railing in alarm.
Boil the blood out of you in... No, you don't!
Let go of my arm!
With one hand, Raut clutched at the handrail, then with both. For a moment the two men stood swaying. Then, suddenly, with a violent jerk, Horrocks had twisted him from his hold. He clutched at Horrocks and missed. His foot went back into empty air. In midair, he twisted himself, and then cheek and shoulder and knees struck the hot cone together. He clutched the chain by which the cone hung suspended, and the thing sank an infinitesimal amount as he struck it. A circle of glowing red appeared around him, and a tongue of flame, released from the chaos within, flickered up towards him. An intense pain assailed him at the knees, and he could smell the singeing of his hands. He raised himself to his feet and tried to climb up the chain, and then something struck his head. Black and shining in the moonlight, the throat of the furnace rose about him. Horrocks, he saw, stood above him by one of the carts of fuel on the rail. The gesticulating figure was bright and white in the moonlight, and shouting.
Fizzle, you fool! Fizzle, you hunter of women! You hot-blooded hound! Boil! Boil! Boil!
Suddenly, he caught up a handful of coal out of the truck and flung it deliberately, lump after lump, at Raut.
Horrocks! Horrocks!
Raut clung crying to the chain, pulling himself up from the burning of the cone. Each missile Horrocks flung hit him. His clothes charred and glowed. As he struggled, the cone dropped, and a rush of hot, suffocated gas whooped out and burned round him in a swift breath of flame. His human likeness departed from him. When the momentary red had passed, Horrocks saw a charred, blackened figure, its head streaked with blood, still clutching and fumbling with the chain and writhing in agony. A cindery animal, an inhuman, monstrous creature that began a sobbing, intermittent shriek. Abruptly at the sight, the ironmaster's anger passed. A deadly sickness came upon him. The heavy odor of burning flesh came drifting up to his nostrils. Horrocks' sanity returned to him.
God have mercy upon me. Oh God, what have I done?
He knew the thing below him, save that it still moved and felt, was already a dead man. that the blood of the poor wretch must be boiling in his veins. An intense realization of that agony came to his mind and overcame every other feeling. For a moment he stood irresolute, and then, turning to the cart, he hastily dumped its entire contents of coal upon the struggling thing that had once been a man. The mass fell with a thud and went spilling over the edge of the cone. The shriek ended, and a boiling confusion of smoke, dust, and flame came rushing up towards him. As it passed, he saw the cone clear again. He stood trembling, clinging to the rail with both hands. His lips moved, but no words came to them. Down below, the sounds of voices and running steps, the crash and roar of machinery ceased abruptly in the rolling mill below. Murder. Horrible, agonizing murder. These were the ironmaster's intentions when he led the hapless artist Raut away from his wife's chamber. Horrocks has certainly arranged a most memorable and horrifying effect. It has been a hot-blooded night in Newcastle here on BeFM Drama as we come to the end of this adaptation of The Cone.